In the immediate aftermath of the Frontier War, the Tantalus Cluster was left desolated by the conflict. The Great Famine was at its apex, having been exacerbated by 10 years of warfare, and resources like drift and warship-grade alloys were in just as short supply as foodstuffs. By the start of 0302 PCU, almost all remaining materials and manpower were diverted entirely to the new Edric's Gate program, but this left a brief period of almost 2 years between the end of the war and the beginning of the Gate project, where the naval shipyards of the Centrum Assembly were still operating with full wartime funding, without the constant demands of fleet repair and reinforcement. In this short grace period, the engineers of Keeper's Dance Fleet Yards made a short-lived attempt to introduce modern designs into the largely outdated fleets of the Centrum Defence Force. All of these projects were quickly cancelled with the start of the Edric's Gate program, but existed in varying states of completion, with one project in particular reaching far enough into its design process to spawn a single functioning prototype. This experimental vessel was the CSV Huntress, first and only in what would have been a new line of Huntress Class Ambush Corvettes. At a length of 98 meters and a width of 28.05 meters, the space frame of the Huntress class represents a stark departure from almost every convention in traditional Centrum warship design. The concept of the Huntress was inspired by the lethally effective Outrider vessels employed by the Frontier Union across the war, and intended to fill a fast attack role that the CDF had recently been neglecting in favor of full-sized ships of the line. As the Huntress represented the first opportunity for design innovation in many years, the ship was also used as a platform to test various new ideas and technologies, which resulted in one of the most expensive and complicated warships ever constructed. Chief among these innovations were the ship's 8 centrally mounted adjustable vector thrusters. These powerful fusion engines entirely replaced any chemical RCS ports and serve as the Corvette's principal means of course correction and combat maneuvering. The sheer power these drives exert on the ship's frame when acting in unison allows the vessel to reorient itself at frightening speeds, relying entirely on drift-based inertial compensation to keep the vessel's crew alive through harsh turns and sudden changes in velocity. While the vectored thruster system makes the Huntress into a fierce and nimble adversary in combat, it also presents a number of design flaws that were never properly addressed. Firstly, it makes the Corvette exorbitantly difficult to pilot, and without time or funding for more extensive flight exercises, no data could ever be gathered to mitigate this issue. Piloting the Huntress requires a constant awareness of the ship's momentum and direction, as well as the specific behaviour of each vectored thruster through any turn. With enough experience, a helmsman can learn to reflexively accommodate for the ship's unnatural motion and take full advantage of its agility, but the lack of conventional RCS still presents certain unavoidable problems. For instance, it is terminally difficult to carry out low-strength correctional burns without normal RCS ports, a problem that frequently manifests during careful docking operations and is liable to result in embarrassing collisions or minor collateral damage. Adding further to the ship's unconventional design style, the Huntress class was built around a horizontal deck layout across 2 distinct levels and a small subdeck. These decks took advantage of constant drift-based artificial gravity rather than more conventional thrust or spin-based gravity simulation. This was a product of the already abnormal quantity of drift used in the ship's construction to provide the required level of inertial compensation, allowing the designers to include the kind of internal gravity plating that had previously been seen only on the most expensive pre-war luxury yachts. This also presents a number of military advantages by removing the need for a large and cumbersome centrifuge ring or drum, allowing for a slimmer space frame that presents a more difficult target for hostile weapons. The Huntress class is designed to operate with a crew of 8 and carries a matching number of single-occupant escape pods for use in any evacuation. The ship is also compatible with a number of large auto-loading mechanisms and automated control systems that allow the Corvette to be manned by as little as a single pilot, though a crew of at least 3 is required to operate all shipboard functions properly. The vessel's central bay features a retractable loading ramp and is large enough to house a sizable quantity of cargo, as well as a single all-terrain rover suspended in a storage cradle at the roof of the bay, from which it can be lowered for rapid deployment. The Huntress class derives its forward propulsion from a single aft-mounted drive cone fixed to a slight gimbal. This serves as the exhaust for the Corvette's drift drive, which allows the craft to accelerate to relativistic velocities for transplanetary travel. The enormous thermal buildup caused by the drift drive necessitates the ship's two large radiator panels, each fixed to articulated hinges on either side of the main drive. As the vessel increases its burn and heat buildup becomes more intense, the radiators are extended away from the cone to emit the ship's waste heat into space, avoiding the risk of thermal overload and maintaining the drive system under manageable temperatures. The Huntress class is armed with a spinally mounted broadhead lock retractable coil gun, capable of accelerating molybdenum permalloy projectiles to terrifying speeds. This long-range weapon is crucial to the ambush tactics the Huntress was designed to employ, allowing the vessel to deliver an accurate and powerful first strike at the outbreak of combat, inflicting critical damage using either conventional armor-piercing rounds or hull-shredding canister rounds, and immediately placing the enemy on the defensive. Like almost all coil guns, the weapon can also be double-shotted. By loading the gun with two projectiles and charging both its primary and backup capacitor banks, an incredibly powerful and wildly inaccurate short-range salvo can be fired. This comes at the cost of pushing the weapon to its operational limits and risking a catastrophic failure, which has made the practice fairly uncommon outside of the most desperate and pivotal engagements. The Corvette is also equipped with 4 laterally articulated kinetic autoguns fixed to the vessel's wingtips, each of which is loaded with advanced ranging lasers and rapid-action targeting suites. These autoguns serve as point defense measures to shield the Corvette from missile attack, but also provide a deadly ship-to-ship weapon in close-quarters combat, more than suitable for dispatching attacking strike craft and able to inflict moderate damage on light warships. In addition to its ballistic armament, the Huntress class also carries an impressive and varied loadout of torpedoes and other missile warheads, all deployed via rapid-cycling pressurized launch slits on the port and starboard side of the Corvette's bow. The vessel carries variable-yield guided torpedoes, as well as multi-warhead swarm missiles, dumbfire cluster rockets, and advanced flechette torpedoes designed to explode into a shotgun blast of heated shrapnel before impact, inflicting vicious damage on the crew complement and unprotected subsystems of a target vessel. While the agility and firepower of the Huntress class allow the ship to excel in combat, the prototype vessel does possess a number of vulnerabilities in other areas. Should the vessel suffer damage to one or more of its vectored thrusters, it will quickly transition from being extremely difficult to pilot to being essentially impossible to pilot, and with no standard RCS thrusters included, there is no failsafe for this problem. The vessel's armor plating is also incredibly thin, designed to offer the best possible thrust-to-mass ratio, and the Corvette is forced to rely on its evasive agility to survive. Lastly, the many moving parts involved in the ship's vector system and the complicated experimental software used in its avionics and navigation packages make shipboard maintenance extremely difficult for any technician not familiar with the vessel's quirks. In early 0302 PCU, the Huntress project was cancelled, with all KDFY resources and personnel being reallocated to the crucial Edric's Gate project. Only the original and largely untested prototype was ever constructed, and in the sudden transfer of operations, the vessel fell into a web of classified naval bureaucracy that prevented it from being either completed or scrapped for materials. As a result, the Corvette was simply abandoned in a shipbreaking yard on Rialtis, forgotten by the CDF and by KDFY, as both organizations became preoccupied by the paramount importance of the upcoming Avalon expedition. Given the military nature of the original project and the small size of the team that designed the ship, few had ever known about the vessel in the first place, and fewer still have given a second thought to its fate since the project was cancelled. But in recent years, some civilian sources and traffic control staff have reported sighting a privately owned craft that presents a starkly different profile to any conventional Centrum vessel, one that would no doubt be recognised by anyone who had previously worked within the experimental design labs of Keeper's Dance fleet yards, though perhaps not under the name they remember. The Sojourn Kickstarter is now live. Please consider following the link in the description and pledging any amount you can to help us turn this project we've all worked so hard on into a full series. Any amount you can pledge brings us one step closer, and we have an exciting range of pledge rewards for you to check out. Everything we've made so far has been with a tiny team on a small budget on limited time, but with your help we can broaden the sci-fi genre with a full range of original stories in a new and fleshed out universe. Thank you all so much to those of you who have supported us so far, and to any of you who pledge or help share our Kickstarter campaign around. This is Daniel from Spacedock, signing off.